Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This week I'm coming to you from Southern California. I'm often out here, as many of you know, whenever my daughter and her husband travel. I am the official dog watcher of her two sweet, adorable bulldogs. When I was packing for this trip, I grabbed a few things that I knew I could upcycle and that I had planned to upcycle for a while. And then when I went to get my supplies, I naturally gravitated to all the IOD products because there are so many beautiful holiday things to use. I grabbed stamps, molds, a couple of paint inlays, and some transfers. For those of you who have never watched my channel, my name is Marla, and I'm the owner and creator behind From Rust to Roses Vintage. If you like vintage items, antique items, if you like thrifting and upcycling, then I hope that you will consider subscribing to my channel, giving me a thumbs up, and sharing my content with others. Without further ado, let's get started and I'll show you what I did with those items I brought with me. For project one, I started with a cardboard Christmas box that I had thrifted a couple of months ago at my local Goodwill. This is one of the IOD molds that I grabbed to bring with me. I love the ornate designs, and especially around Christmas time, I tend to go a little more Victorian with my decor. As you will see, I used many of the elements on this mold because I really wanted the top of the box to be ornate and special. I wanted it to be the standout feature of the box. Whenever I use the molds, I use IOD air dry clay, and I always dust the molds with cornstarch ahead of time. This time I forgot to on this particular mold, and you can see that it was a little sticky coming out. Here's the box. I've made a couple of those, and now I'm going to use my quick and thick Type Bond glue to glue them onto the top of the box. I continue with this procedure until I have all of the molds made and glued on top of the box in an arrangement that I liked. After I got them all glued on, I noticed that there was a space in the middle, and so I decided I would make one more mold to fill in that empty space. I set the molds aside to dry for a little bit, and while they were drying, I turned my attention to the box. You can see how faded it was on the bottom, so I think this was a box that had been around for quite a while. I decided to go with a dark green on this one. I believe that this is Eden by DIY. To make the paint go farther and to smooth it out as I'm painting, I sprayed a little water on it. You can always do that with DIY paint, and then it just glides on perfectly. After the molds had dried for about 15 minutes, I mixed together some red paint with a little bit of black. I wanted the top to be more of a burgundy color, and I didn't bring every color I have with me. That would have been impossible, so I've had to learn to mix paints as I go. I really like the way this color turned out. It's still red, goes well with the green for Christmas, but is much deeper and I think more elegant for the kind of box that I'm making. It took a little bit longer to paint this than I had anticipated because it was very important that I got the bristles of the brush down into all of the details in those molds. And if you've used this mold, you know that it is highly detailed. That's one of the things I love about IOD molds. After I had it painted, I then went back and painted the inside of the box. And once that burgundy paint had dried, I gave it a coat of DIY's liquid patina. Molds with this much detail definitely need something to bring that detail forward, and so I decided to use my DIY golden ticket. This was something that I didn't want to distress, even though I do distress a lot of my items that I upcycle. I just wanted the elegance of that gold all over the top of the box. I absolutely love the way it looks on the burgundy paint. My next thought was to do something to the bottom of the box to give it some elegance as well, but I didn't want to cover it in molds. So I got out a stencil, and I've never tried this before, but I decided I would try to stencil with the golden ticket, which happens to be a wax, I believe, but I forgot to bring gold paint with me, The only gold I did have was a color I didn't like and didn't match the top. So I decided to give it a try, and guess what? It worked great. Even though I didn't want to put a lot of molds on the bottom of the box, I felt like it at least needed some trim to give it a little balance with the top. And so from that same mold, I'm using this button or pearl trim and gluing it all around the bottom. Once I finish with that, I paint it with the dark green and then use the golden ticket to give it a little bit of gilding. For project 2, I grabbed a big mug that I had thrifted. I wanted to do a Santa mug like I saw a friend of mine do. Connie from the Painted Photographer is the first one that I saw do this, and she did an amazing job. And I even joked with her that I was going to make a mug as well. However, I didn't want to make mine exactly like hers. I wanted to turn my mug into a candy dish. And so I only used a part of the Santa mold on the mug itself, and then I had a wooden candlestick, I believe it probably was at one time, and I was going to glue the mug on the top of that and then finish the mold down the front and turn this into a beautiful and fun dish for Christmas candy. I started by painting the mug and the mold with DIY's White Swan. I stippled it on because I really don't like paintbrush strokes, and they were really showing up on the mug. I then turned my attention to Santa's beard. I wanted to paint it gray. I knew that later I would go over it with the white again, and that the gray would help to bring out the details in the beard. I then turned to Santa's hat. I used some of the paint I had used on my box with just a little more red in it to paint his hat. Once the gray paint had dried, I used a fan brush to go over the top of it with some more of the DIY White Swan. I set the mug aside and then turned my attention to the candlestick. I glued the remainder of Santa's beard on the front, leaving some pieces above the candlestick that I could use to blend in with the mold on the cup. Then I went ahead and painted all of Santa's beard with gray and then used some water to spray on there, and the gray started to drip off, staying only in those deep details of his beard. I used a paper towel to dab off the excess water and paint, and then took a look at it. I thought it looked great. After I finished with Santa's beard, then I went in with the DIY White Swan and painted the candlestick. When all the paint had dried, I turned it around and decided it was time to paint Santa's face. I went back and watched Connie, the Painted Photographer's video a second time so that I could see how she did the face. I'm not quite the artist she is, but I've learned a lot from her, and in the end, I was very happy with the way it turned out. It might be hard to see in the video, but I did mix a little red paint with the white paint to give Santa some rosy cheeks. Then went in with some black paint to paint in his eyes. And after I finished with Santa's face, I got out a soft cloth, actually a wet wipe, and went back and distressed the candlestick. That's a nice thing about DIY paint. It's clay-based, does not have a sealer in it, and so before you seal it, it's very easy to wipe it back if you want that distressed look. After I was done distressing, I gave the entire project a coat of DIY liquid patina. Once the liquid patina had dried, I went in with Pent Art's aging wax so that I could give it a more vintage look. I used a small brush to apply the aging wax to the fur on Santa's hat. I didn't think that the rag would get it down in there, but I did use the rag to buff it off, and I just kept going over it until I achieved the look that I wanted. I really loved how this turned out. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. For Project 3, I used a little box that I thrifted at my favorite thrift store here in California. I think on the second day I was here, I took a walk down to Santa Monica Boulevard to see what they had, and as soon as I saw this, I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. Even though it was already a Christmas box, I have been dying to use the little houses in the Partridge Lane, especially after my trip to London in the spring when I was able to go to Notting Hill and see the rows of houses there. I wanted this to have a nighttime look, or maybe that late afternoon in the winter when the skies get kind of dark and gray. And so I started out with Fusion Mineral Paint in the color Seaside. After I had given it a coat of that, I went back and mixed a little black into some Seaside and went back up towards the top, knowing that the sky always gets darker from the top down as the sun sets. After the paint dried, I mixed some DIY White Swan with water and splattered the four sides of the box. I think in the end it kind of looks like it's snowing. To add to that wintry look, I went along the edges of the roof and started painting it with White Swan to make it look like it was covered in snow. I ended up painting the entire roof because there was something I wanted to add to it, and you will see that in just a little bit. I then went back and added some icicles all along the roof lines. When applying the transfers, I started out with the row of houses, but then decided they weren't big enough, and so I went and cut individual houses out of the transfer booklet to put all the way around. I ended up doing 3 sides with houses and the back with the pine trees that are also in that transfer booklet. After all of the transfers were down, I went and got out my glitter paste and went along the roof line of the house. When I finished the roof line, I wanted to add some sparkle to all of the snow, but I didn't have just glitter with me, only the paste. So I thought I would try something. I mixed the glitter paste with some DIY liquid patina to make it more liquid and easier to paint on, and it gave me just the little bit of glimmer and shine frostiness that I wanted on the roof of the house. And then I decided to just carry it on through the icicles. I love the effect. As a final touch, I decided to take some of the garland from that same transfer booklet and add it around the top of the box. It didn't meet up exactly, and so I took 2 star-shaped ornaments out of the transfer booklet and put them in between, and it was perfect. I know I say this a lot, but I do love the way this turned out. It is so fun and festive, and Makes me imagine what Notting Hill looks like right now. For project 4, I had grabbed a couple of small picture frames that I had in my stash. However, I forgot to grab any particle board or any canvases to put in them, and so I had to be creative. So for the first one, I decided I was just going to use the glass. And I got out my DIY white swan again and gave the glass 2 coats. The second coat I put on pretty thick because I was going to use one of my IOD transfers for this particular project. For the first frame, I wanted to use this paint inlay that says A Christmas Carol. I sprayed the paint side of the inlay with water and then laid it down into the wet paint, put a little more water on it, and then dabbed off the excess, and then set it aside to dry. I thought a red frame would be perfect for this. I had actually painted this little frame not on camera, but I used Fort York Red, which is a fusion mineral paint, and now I'm using my vintage aging wax to darken it up just a bit and make it look a little more vintage. As a final touch, I added a little bit of my golden ticket gilding wax. When the inlay was dry, I sprayed it with some water, used a paper towel again to dab back the excess, and then gave it about 30 seconds. Sometimes I'll spray it more than once just to make sure that I'm getting all parts of the inlay paper wet. And if you do that, it should peel off very easily. And I continue to be amazed every time this happens. I used a little bit of my DIY decrepit dust to go around and age the edges, and then this project was finished. For the second picture frame, I used the heavy piece of cardboard that was inside the frame and gave it 2 coats of DIY white swan. Followed the same procedure that I had followed with the first photo in laying down my transfer. While the transfer was drying, I decided to paint the frame, and this time I am using that dark green Eden by DIY, the same green that I had used on my first box. I aged the frame the same way I had the first one, and so they were matching, just in different colors. I also gave this one a hint of the golden ticket gilding wax. When the inlay was dry, I sprayed some water on it, dabbed off the excess, and then removed this one just as I had the first. They both came out beautiful. I forgot to mention after I did the first inlay that you always have to seal your inlays, so I used liquid patina to seal both of these, and as you can see, I'm aging the edges of this one as well. Now I must admit that I am partial to A Christmas Carol, but I think both of these turned out beautiful. What do you think? For project 5, I grabbed a framed picture that I had purchased at Goodwill probably last summer. It was nice and long, and I was hoping that it would be wide enough to use the Sugar Plum Fairy stamp from IOD because I love the Nutcrackers in it. I started out by giving the glass a base coat of a dark brown paint by Fusion. I believe it's Oakham, but I'm not 100% sure. I was going to use the DIY white swan on top of it, and then I knew I would be able to go back and easily distress it with a wet wipe. I didn't want to make this video an hour long, so I didn't show you painting the entire thing with the white swan. I actually gave it 2 coats. The first coat just as a base coat over the brown, and then this coat I'm stippling on because, again, I really don't like brush strokes. and DIY paint is not self-leveling. While the paint was drying, I turned my attention to the frame. It was an off-white, but again, I thought it needed a fresh coat of paint. So I'm starting with black. That way, if I put any lighter color paint over the top, I will be able to distress it back as well. I have seen the Nutcracker stamp used multiple times, and usually it's done in the color black. I think I watched one other person do it in red and green, so I thought I would try something different. This is actually an ink pad from Tim Holtz, archival ink called Sepia. For my first couple of stamps, it didn't stamp as well as I wanted it to, but I kept going and then decided in the end I could go back and stamp over the first 2 or 3 if I didn't like the way they looked. However, I was not wanting them to be perfect because, again, I like things to look old and vintage. And as you can see here, I am going back over the first 2 or 3 just to add a little more detail to the stamped image. After the ink had dried, I went in with a wet wipe and started to distress back some of that DIY White Swan paint. The last thing I needed to do was finish the frame. I had gone over that black with a light color, fusion mineral paint, I believe in the color limestone. I did leave a little bit of the black showing through, although it's not that obvious in the video. And then I used the Pent Art aging wax to go in and age the frame. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Not everybody decorates their home in bright colors or traditional colors of red and green, and so for any neutral home decor, this would be perfect. So I've decided to call the last couple of projects a bonus because there's very, very little upcycling involved. I picked up this cherub for a couple of dollars last week, and I'm using my favorite Rust-Oleum vintage gold spray paint. I took it outside and painted it, and then brought it in and used my Pent Art aging wax on it to tone down the shine a little bit and make it look a little more vintage and gilded. My daughter and her husband have been saving these yogurt cups for me. They thought they would be something I would want to upcycle, and as it turns out, they are. In fact, I took one home the last time I was here, upcycled it, and used it in last week's video. I simply take the clear ones outside, spray them with that same gold paint, and then come in and do the same thing I did with the angel. Just put that Pent Art aging wax on them and buff them down. And they just make the most festive little candle holders and literally cost pennies to make. Here is the one from last week's vignette. So what do you think of these upcycles? I already have plans for at least 12 more of these yogurt cups. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch me. My YouTube channel is growing, and it's all thanks to you. I love the comments that you make. I read every one of them, and I respond to every one of them. And so if you're new to the channel, I hope you will consider subscribing, give me a like and a thumbs up, and I will see you next week.